I've got a thought-provoking question for you today, Raiders. In a game where there are no rules forcing cooperation, no reputation systems, and no official punishment for betrayal, why do some players still choose to enforce fairness? Why do groups of raiders sometimes band together, not for loot, not even for survival, but to hunt down players who attack everybody on sight? Now, if you've spent even a minor amount of time topside in Ark Raiders, then you've probably encountered these players. For lack of better terminology, let's define this group as the rat catchers. Groups that actively track down aggressive raiders, players who see themselves not just as survivors, but as balancers of the ecosystem. And that raises an interesting sub-question. Is fairness in Ark Raiders something that was designed by the developers? Or is it something that players have created themselves? To understand that, we need to look at something deeper than just mechanics here. We need to look at how we behave when rules disappear. Of course, Ark Raiders is fundamentally a player-driven environment. Topside offers freedom to all of us. You can cooperate, you can avoid everybody, you can ambush people, you can betray your alliances. There is no built-in morality system, and yet despite this freedom, something interesting happens. Players begin to develop unwritten rules. You'll hear them in proximity chat. Friendly, just passing through, let's deal with the Ark first. These are not mechanics, but they're actually social signals, and once social signals appear, something else naturally follows. Expectations. Now, psychologists have studied fairness for decades. One of the most famous examples is the ultimatum game. In this experiment, one person receives money and must decide how to split it with another person. If the second person feels that the split is unfair, even if they still receive something, they often reject the offer entirely and both players lose. Why? Well, because humans value fairness more than the pure reward itself, and this phenomenon is called inequity aversion. People would rather lose something themselves than allow someone else to benefit unfairly. Now, let's apply this concept within the context of Ark Raiders in mind then. So a raider who ambushes every player they encounter might of course gain loot, but they might also violate the informal expectations that many other raiders bring into Topside. And when that happens, other players often respond, not just with retaliation, but with organised retaliation. So this is where the idea of the rat catcher appears. Players who actively hunt aggressive raiders. Sometimes they form a temporary alliance, sometimes entire squads dedicate their raid to eliminating a known hostile group of players. These actions don't increase loot efficiency though, they don't even guarantee survival, but they restore a balance. Now, from a psychological perspective, this is a classic example of community enforcement. When formal rules don't exist, groups create their own systems of accountability. And you see this in real-world societies, you see it in online communities, and surprisingly, we now see it inside an extraction shooter within Ark Raiders. Another fascinating element is reputation without infrastructure. Ark Raiders doesn't actually track player morality as such. There is no direct karma system outside of the aggression-based matchmaking system. There's no outlaw or rogue status as such. There's no visible reputation score to keep track of. But reputation can still spread. A player who betrays can become recognisable indirectly through similar behavioural patterns. Voice chat interactions then carry memory. Encounters create stories, and those stories then shape our future behaviour. Suddenly then, a raider's actions in one encounter can influence how we treat one another in the next, not because the game enforces it either, but because players remember. I actually have a perfect example of this within one of my raids in the early months of the game's release. I was crossing the breach area of the map, and as I was running up one of the sloped ramps, I was shot from behind. Fortunately, I managed to escape just enough to recover, but chose to retaliate. Upon doing this, after managing to destroy his shield, the smoke popped from the tactical Mark II augment that he was wearing, making it difficult to finish him off. As we then tussled backwards and forwards for around 30 seconds or so, weaving aggressive manoeuvres with defensive postures when needed, there was a friendly duo in the distance who were watching the whole time. Now I ended up losing the fight, but one of the duos defibbed me and allowed me a chance at justice. We then proceeded to chase the rat, and they allowed me to finish him. Ironically, he was holding on to a Patina 4, so we all decided to band together and destroy the Rocketeer that was hovering above the hydroponics area. This whole interaction, from the you never know who's watching element through to the decision of using the rat's weapon to destroy an arch enemy, absolutely fascinated me, and will no doubt stay with me for a very long time. The other force that drives Fairness Topside is the presence of a shared threat: the Arc machines. Now, unlike human players, Arc enemies represent a universal danger to us all, and humans are wired to cooperate when facing a common enemy. This concept is well documented in social psychology. Groups that might otherwise compete often cooperate when facing external threats, and in Arc Raiders this happens constantly. Two raiders might approach the same area cautiously, weapons at the ready, but the moment an Arc patrol appears, their priorities then shift. Suddenly they're fighting side by side, not because they instantly trust each other, but because survival temporarily aligns their goals. And moments like this then reinforce a very subtle idea, that not every encounter topside has to end in betrayal. So what does all of this tell us about Arc Raiders? Well, first, it shows that fairness is not something that must always be programmed as such. Sometimes it can emerge naturally from player interaction, and again this comes back to the topic of player agency. Our choices matter, our interactions feel real, and this of course encourages that natural emergence. And when some people share then a space with risk, limited resources, and the freedom to make choice, they begin to develop their own moral frameworks. Second, it highlights something interesting about Embark's design philosophy. The game leans heavily into player autonomy, as we've discussed, and you are simply just free to choose how you behave. But that freedom also means you must live with the consequences of your reputation and your choices. And finally, it reveals something about players themselves. Even in a harsh survival environment where betrayal can be profitable, many players still care about balance and justice. Not always, but often enough to shape the experience, because when the systems don't enforce fairness, players sometimes will. So if you enjoy exploring the deeper systems behind Arc Raiders, not just strategies and loot routes, but the psychology of how we are behaving topside, then consider subscribing to the channel. There are a lot of interesting dynamics emerging in this game as the community continues to grow. And sometimes the most fascinating parts of Arc Raiders aren't actually the machines we fight. They're the people that we encounter along the way. So until next time, Raiders, I'll see you topside.